All right. I think we're all set. So again, good morning, everybody. So my name is Ricardo Inácio, and I'm going to be today's meeting chair. Kicking off with first things first. So like start with an acknowledgement of country. So HL7 Australia acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of Australia, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So today's meeting agenda is displayed here on the screen. So we'll kick off with our usual business and updates, and then Heath will take us through the report back from the HL7 Connectathon and the IPS breakout in Rotterdam, and then Dercy will take us through a topic around AUPSR1 artifacts. That should be AFMM2, and then we'll go and do a bit of a walkthrough of the next meeting agenda. So in terms of usual minutes, usual business, so kick us off with the approval of minutes, and I believe, yep, Shelley's just shared them in the chat. So hope everybody has had a chance to go through the minutes. I will just open them up here on the screen. So can you see the minutes on the screen, or you see the presentation still?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep, cool. So the minutes are here on our Confluence page, and I'll just quickly do a scroll down. So what I'm going to check is if everybody's had the opportunity to, first of all, have a look at them, and if there's any questions or comments anyone wants to raise, please do so. Okay, I don't see any hands or anything in the chat. So I think we're then good to go, and I'd like to ask if anyone would like to move a motion to approve last meeting's minutes, please.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Stephen. Can we have a second, please?
I'll second Dushi.
Thanks, Dushi. I'll start the poll. Okay, hopefully you can see it popping up on your screen now. If you're not able to vote, please just drop your vote in the chat, and I'll add it to the final tally. Okay, so we have 17 votes, which is a large number of votes already. So let me just end the poll, and I'll read out the results. So we've had 19 votes, including 14 affirmative and 5 abstain, which means the motion has passed and the minutes from the previous meeting are approved.
Can I just triple check, Ricardo? That includes the affirmative Michael put in the chat as well?
It does, yep.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Moving, let me just go back on. Yeah. So moving down the list in terms of updates and news, there's something here that is relevant to this group. So the IPS technical errata 2.01 will be published by the 26th of June. and this will be a dependency for a UPS R1. This updates the extension pack to 5.3.0. So just going to ask if there's anyone, Heath or Michael, who wants to provide a bit more background information on this one. If you want to do that, please do so.
Danielle's not on the call.
Yeah, I was going to throw to Danielle too.
Yeah, I didn't see her on the call.
No, she's in there.
Oh, is she? Okay.
Yeah, I
Danielle.
finally managed to get in. I have no idea what was going on with the network, but yeah, and my internet, I keep getting the warnings, internet connection is unstable, so we'll see how we go.
So we're just checking if you want to provide an update on this
Yeah.
on this topic here.
Yeah, Dusha and I are working with Rob, who's doing the work on the I.
Sounds like she's having trouble.
Yeah.
I might jump in.
Fine.
So basically, there was an issue with the way that the IPS specification was published. It was using an unpublished version of the extensions pack to support a feature that was quite late added to the IPS around the way that data that's rendered in sections are linked back to the individual content entries within the section using some sort of linking. And as a result of that, it was breaking downstream IGs, including, I think it was also causing us problems, AUPS, as a result of that. But I think also for implementers as well that were trying to include the IPS as a dependency. The extensions pack has now been officially released. So this is the primary reason for the errata, is to basically rework this to include this new published 5.3.0 extensions pack instead of the unpublished one that was previously used. As a result of that, they're also just making a couple of other non-normative changes to some of the text. One of those that is quite relevant or interesting is that because of the SNOMED having now published not just a subset of SNOMED, but a global value set, or effectively an expansion of SNOMED CT that is now allowed to be used by any country internationally. There's some wording around that fact to basically say exactly that this global SNOMED value set can be used throughout IPS compared to the previous subset. Anything else significant there?
Heath,
I
at
think we
today's
could.
Heath, at today's patient care conference call, we approve the IPS request for the errata content and also the publication request. So it's all done now.
Thanks, Stephen. Dushi?
Oh, I was just going to mention the dates. We still don't have the definite timeline for the IPS errata to be published, but we are expecting it to be done by the 26th of June.
Yeah, so that does have an impact on us because we want to actually
Yes.
publish a UPS R1 with the IPS 201, and we've requested that it get done as per what she just said, which is to be published by 26th of June so that we can include it in our R1. Thanks, Ricardo.
Yep. Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, Hershey, and also thanks, Stephen, for your update. All right. So moving on, I think it's now back to you, Heath, with a report back on the FHIR Connectathon and working group meeting in Rotterdam.
All right, let me see if I can share because it
Yep.
may be easier. I have been having problems, so let's see if it happens. Otherwise, I might have to ask you to do that on my behalf.
Yep, not a problem.
Can you see my screen?
No, it's black.
Black. Okay. I
Yep,
think
I'll
revert
put
back to you.
no, I could see it. So I think it's when you probably press Alt Tab, so you might be sharing the wrong one.
I'll try that again. I was too
Yeah, so it's black again. Anyway, oh yeah, I can see
I
it now.
think it's a delay of like 5 seconds, if
Okay,
anyone can
yep,
hear me.
yep, we can hear you now, Daniel, and yeah, Keith, we can see your screen now.
We'll go with that. Let's see how we go. So, if you're not aware, Danielle and I and a couple of others had the opportunity to go to the May HL7 FHIR Connectathon and Working Group meeting in Rotterdam. The ship was actually our meeting and hotel venue. It is basically permanently moored in the docks of Rotterdam. So that was actually quite an interesting experience to live on a ship for a week. That wasn't moving. And we had basically meetings in all of the really cool rooms that they would have had back in the 50s. So this was a sort of an operating ship back between Netherlands and Americas during the 50s, 60s, 70s until it was decommissioned. So we had meetings in places like the Grand Ballroom and the smoking room and the theater and things like that. So yeah, that was pretty nice experience. As you probably know from an IPS or an AUPS perspective, we have our HL7 Connectathons where we are testing the implementation guide of AUPS, and this was the outcomes of the last Connectathon back in March. So we had a number of our regular attendees, and what we gave them those people the opportunity to basically help us as Sparked go to the Connectathon in Rotterdam to see if we can actually test AUPS against the rest of the world. So we had a number of server implementers that came along that had their AUPS implementations and a number of consumer apps. They also quite often produce producers as well. It's a bit of a delay, I know.
Sorry. Oh, have you changed screens, or are you still on the main screen?
Am I on the ship?
Yeah, you're still on the
It's a
ship.
5 second delay, so you're going to have to try to like go
it's-
forwards a bit and then like.
It's
Oh,
more than 4 seconds. So
yeah.
I might have to revert to you.
I actually seem to have control over your slides, so
Oh, okay.
I don't know how, but can people now see the one with the green arrows?
No.
No?
No,
Okay, so
just seeing the ship.
only I can see it. So all right, I'll share the screen. Give me
Thank
just
you.
a sec.
I was about 2 screens ahead of that.
So just let me know. So I will.
Yep.
Wait,
Next one.
this one?
Next one. Okay, so basically we had these vendors that had expressed interest to provide their AUPS implementations as part of the Rotterdam Connectathon so that we could actually demonstrate the use of the IG and test that against other vendors around the world. So if you go to the next one, we had other implementers there from Europe with Epic and SensorTrend. So the EPS standard that's being developed at the moment. That's the European Patient Summary. We also have the US PCS vendors there that was also declaring conformance to the Patient Summary for Canada in the red, Meditech. And then we had some more general IPS compliant vendors, one from New Zealand, one from Italy, and another one from Washington State as well. So next screen, that's basically the connections we were able to achieve through that 2 days of session on a Saturday and a Sunday. So I must express a lot of thanks to those Australian vendors that made their systems available to for us to basically test that the Australian Patient Summary is able to work internationally as intended or hoped. And as much as we might talk about some inconsistencies in the various ways that other jurisdictions are implementing IPS, we certainly at a higher level demonstrated that it is possible to exchange IPSs between these systems. We did have some teething problems along the way leading up to the day, where some of the servers went down, but because we had great support back here in a completely different time zone, they were up and running most of the time during those 2 days. So thank you very much for the preparation work done in advance and during those couple of days to those vendors. Next screen. Some of the highlights around this, you may know from some of our consumer journeys, we have a very favorite, an Australian patient, Jeremy Banks, who was able to be basically had an IPS extracted out of the Sparked server into one of the vendor's viewers here, and as part of that, we were then able to, on the next screen, share that IPS as a shared health summary. If you can go to the next screen. So basically extract that out as a patient summary using a QR code. And then next screen, we were able to have one of the American vendors basically scan that QR code, import that IPS into their system, marry that up with one of their existing patient records, and convert it to a PDF and store it into their usual documents area of their system. So this was basically a very nice demonstration of going all the way through of getting an IPS produced, having it shared through a mediation process using Smart Health Links, and then being consumed. Next screen. And we were also able to do the reverse. So we were able to take a American patient and which was implementing US PCS, and have that also created or viewed within the viewer as well. That was implementing AUPS. Next screen. So in summary, as I said, we were able to demonstrate that AUPS can work on the international stage, yeah, so that was a really big, well, that basically satisfied our objective to see how AUPS would work on the world stage. So that was a great outcome. One side note around that, and I've got AUCDI on the screen, mainly because there was significant interest in the way that we've been developing our standards here in Australia, in particular being clinically driven, and that the CDI standards that underpin our AUPS and AU core, you know, basically that whole story, which I had the opportunity to tell not only in Rotterdam, but also in Dublin as part of a FHIR and Open EHR sort of harmonization or converge and collaborate forum, that, you know, the way that we're going about using Open EHR archetypes, clinical data models, and then underpinning and going through that consensus process with clinicians, and then also through a technical consensus from an implementation guide perspective, that's really been looked at significantly. And I was sitting in a dinner one night, and I had someone, basically a president or a chair of another HL7 affiliate, basically point at me and basically see we need to be doing it the way they are. So that was, yeah, quite a endorsement of the process we're going through in this community. Next slide. Okay, you must have gone offline.
I'm still here, but this one seems to
it's
be
a blank.
Yeah.
Blank page, but it's not blank on my end, so it hasn't updated. I just wanted to have some reflections on this. So basically there was, sharing of IPS is possible amongst different jurisdictions. The dollar summary operation is definitely the primary means for producing an IPS. So that was just something that was consistently going on through the Connectathon. And viewing of the IPS is the primary means of consuming the IPS at this stage. And although it's consistent, it is also inconsistent, the rendering of the content. So some systems were rendering it as basically the individual discrete elements were being rendered. Others were rendering the narrative. Some were doing both, but also the way that it was being rendered was inconsistent. So that might be something that we can consider. And we had some interesting conversations with a group from Austria who have a very similar approach to their national health record implementations over there to our My Health Record, where they have a consistent rendering of their CDA documents, and they're looking at how they can basically do the same thing with IPS to basically have a consistent means of rendering their IPSs. So I think this might be an interesting topic to go forward with. Next screen. Moving on to some of the highlights for the working group meeting. So for those that aren't familiar with this process, basically it is about, I don't know, it was 250 people thereabouts on this ship that were from HL7 in, I don't know how many working groups there are going on concurrently. But basically all of those meetings, there must be, whether there's 20 rooms or something or other going at one particular time, all of those are completely open. So although I was definitely there looking at what was going on around IPS, there were other interesting rooms that I popped in when IPS topics went on. But in particular, from an IPS perspective, we joined up with another group called FHIR Infrastructure, which is basically the ones specifying the core way that FHIR works. And we did have an agenda item that talked about identifying a document as an AUPS document from our previous ones. So if you can just go to the next dot point on that. Certainly from the Connectathon, implementers were rather concerned about not using meta.profile to identify a document being an AUPS or a US PCS or a European PCS. So those implementers also came along to the to this FHIR infrastructure call, and we had the opportunity for the FHIR infrastructure people to explain to us. If you could go to the next up point, the appropriate use of meta.profile, and they were suggesting that meta.profile shouldn't be included by producers. By doing that, it avoids profile validation issues downstream, and that a meta.profile may be applied when a server validates a resource that it receives. So, that was kind of some of the direction that we got around that meta.profile was perhaps not an appropriate way to identify IPS localizations on the next dot point. So we then went through and talked about, that Graham's needing would a means for us to, as localizations, to be clear about the additional rules applied when producing an IPS and the expectations of systems consuming the IPS. So we've had this conversation, this forum, a number of times, and Graham explained again to that forum that these rules are not just structural, that they can't be identified just by a profile alone. And obligations are one of those, that they are system behavior expectations and related to a specific system actor. So on the next up point, and that's exactly what the application feature framework is all about. So this is an extract from the opening introduction of application feature framework, that it allows applications to describe how they implement their FHIR interfaces and their related behavior. So I think at least that it was set the scene for those that haven't had this conversation thus far. So, but also Graham is now that the application feature framework has been published as of the 4th of June, that he will now go away and provide an exemplar feature definition for an IPS localization and a feature assertion that would actually be put into an existence, and then we will sort of get international agreement on this approach going forward. And that may or may not be perhaps through what is called the IPS Coordination Committee, which is sort of a global group of people. There's a little tiger team that's working through some best practices around that both Danielle and I have been attending in the last couple of weeks. So this is work in progress. Next one, and I know I'm running out of time, so I'll try and push through on this next slide. The other one was around obligations in the context of multiple cardinality. So next up point. And probably another one. So there was 2 cards that were referred from the IPS to the FHIR Infrastructure Working Group. One was addressed back in January, sorry, but that's just been published as part of this extensions pack that I talked about earlier. So there's some good wording around the use of obligations in that context. But then there was an additional session that was talking about a new element called applicable number. And we got some clarity around what that definition actually is. So in summary, the new definition of applicable number, but in default, when applicable number is not set, the expectation is that obligations apply to all repetitions allowed by the profile. And when the upper cardinality is unspecified, that the obligation applies to as many as the system can technically manage. But there's an understanding that all systems have a practical limit. So that's basically just saying it's all, but realistically, a system's not going to be able to support an infinite number, so that there is a practical limit. So next up point. However, when the applicable number is present, it overrides the minimum number of repetitions a system must support. So if we set that applicable number to 1, then you basically are putting an expectation that you shall populate at least 1. And that last point is key. It is effectively at least. All right, so it could be 5. So maybe if it's 5 on addresses, then at least 5 addresses need to be supported by the systems. So if more repetitions exist than specified, the system does not have to support all, and and if the system does not support all of them, it's up to the system which ones it chooses. So how does this reflect what we've made a decision in the next one? So next up point, please. So we made a decision for release 1 of AUPS that we were going to, basically our statements are all known. So it's very much aligned. There are some caveats or perhaps some clarity around upper limits or infinite limits, but in principle, it is all. And very much, and because we're not yet applying applicable number, that is our default position right now for IPS. So thank you. I did have another slide, but I won't do that.
Okay, thanks, Heath. All right, I'll skip over this one then. And now we're on to the next topic on the agenda, and it's Joshi who will take us through it. Joshi, do you want to share your screen or do you want me to keep sharing? Can't hear you, so you might be on mute.
Sorry, I was
Oh, yeah.
double muted. I think I can try to share. Let
Yep,
me
I'll
just. Mhm.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, I should be sharing now.
Yep,
Can
we
everyone
can see it.
see that? Yeah. All right. So as we've just heard from Heath, in the report from Rotterdam, we completed another round of patient summary testing, and we now have enough evidence to seek endorsement for the remaining AUPS artifacts to go from AFMM1 to AFMM2. So just as a quick reminder of AFMM2, it requires an artifact to be at AFMM1, and then it requires evidence of successful interoperability testing between independently developed systems. So we need at least 3 independently developed systems testing at least 80% of the core data elements using appropriate scenarios. So the recent testing done at Rotterdam provided that evidence that we needed to assess the remaining artifacts against the AFMM2 criteria. So if I move to the next screen, so we've got a JIRA ticket that proposes moving the 3 artifacts from AFMM1 to AFMM2. That's AU patient summary, pathology result observation, AU patient summary practitioner role, and AU patient summary related person. And all other patient summary artifacts are already at AFMM2. So if I just quickly jump across to the testing page, can everyone see that? The testing page in Confluence?
Yep.
Yeah,
Is
but it
it big
might be a
enough?
little
Shall I make it a bit
small.
tiny bit bigger?
Yeah.
Is that better?
That's good.
Depends. Go to
All right.
go to the table you want us to see, and then we can check.
Yes. Okay. All right. This is the table. Is
Yeah,
that big
that's all
enough?
right to me.
All right. Okay. So I'm pretty sure everyone's seen this page earlier. This is where we keep all the results captured during testing. So it's information of systems that were involved and who tested what and when. So this table provides a summary numbers, I guess. So we can see that AU patient summary practitioner role and related person both had 100% of the mandatory and must support elements tested. So 100% coverage. Both were tested by 6 systems. And patient summary pathology result achieved 95% coverage. So looking at the detail below, we can see that the only must support element that did not meet the 3 system threshold was observation.performer, which was successfully tested by 2 systems. All other mandatory and must support elements met that AFMM2 criteria. So based on these results, we believe that AFMM2 criteria has been met, and we seek endorsement to advance these 3 remaining artifacts to AFMM2. So I'll go back to the JIRA ticket and I'll pause here for any questions or comments about this JIRA before I make a motion.
I just wish we could add something like a gold star because some of the testing was done with international systems, so that was pretty cool. But
It
yeah.
looks amazing. I must admit, I'm very jealous when I see all those errors. I'm really jealous of you and he being there and us not being able to witness all the testing that was done. Looks really amazing. Okay, I'm taking silence. There's no questions. So I'm just going to make a motion that we endorse the three AU patient summary artifacts as listed on the screen as AFMM2.
Thank you, Dushi. We have a seconder, please.
I'll second.
Thanks, Sid. Let me just launch the poll. Okay. Trying to find the poll. They keep changing, but it's still good. Yeah, got it. All right, so you should see it now on your screen. If you're not able to cast your vote, please drop it in the chat and we'll add it to the final tally. So we have already more than 80% participants voting. So I might give it another couple seconds and I'll read out the results. Right, so I'll end the poll now and read out the results. So we had 19 votes, out of which we had 14 affirmative, and that includes the one in the chat, and we had 5 abstains, which means the motion has passed. Thanks, Dushi. Back to you.
Ricardo, I'll stop sharing now.
Okay, let me bring this slide back up again. Okay. So
The schedule, yes. Did you want me to speak to this, Ricardo?
yes, please. I think this is the last item on our agenda. Next steps and what's coming next. So if you want to take us through this, that would be great, Danielle.
It is, and I think there's a slightly hidden trickiness there when we've talked about the publication date, like the last date for IPS technical errata. So we've got, I guess, two more meetings before we are done with AU patient summary R1, and then we move on. And these are really around some of the governance aspects. There's no changes that are coming into our scope at this point. We're going to be having all of those discussions, including some of the things that Heath was talking about around maybe some of the narrative and the rendering presentation, and is there something we want to do in Australia? All of that is going to be next release. So from now on, it's governance stuff. And so we've done the 12th of June, so there's one final meeting. And that final meeting is where, from a publication perspective, we're going to be running through what we call the QA.html, which is that automated kind of thing in the publication build, which is a required part through HL7 AU publication processes to confirm that we are satisfied that we have done all the things that we expected to do. So the scope is correct. We have no more errors or warnings that are, and if there's any new ones, because things move forwards, then we'll talk about that on the day. But I'll just double check with you, Dushi. So in terms of the IPS publication and dependency, are we ahead? Like, is our 26th of June ahead of, so Rob Howsam, who's agreed to publish by the 26th of June, From a time zone perspective, he's in America. So are we in advance of that?
Yeah, we would
Because we're
be.
supposed to be presenting, I think, like the final done kind of thing to the group.
We're about 13 hours ahead of them.
Right, so we might actually need a 25th of June at least from Rob. If not, I think one of the things that potentially crops up here, and we can probably talk about it on the 26th, is that um, it is it is a hard requirement that if any new things through our quality assurance build puts out any warnings, that those are that there's been an opportunity for the work group to cite and accept those or discuss through them if they need to. So we might also need to then talk about an electronic approval mechanism if we don't yet have the IPS like technical errata like and everything ready to go for that meeting. That's what I'm thinking. And Douchey, since you're doing a bunch of the work, yeah, is that or did you have other plans or would that work?
Yoshi, you might be on mute again if
No,
you're talking. Oh,
can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
can you hear me
No,
now?
yeah.
Sorry, I think this time it was the connection. Yes, yeah, Danielle, I think you're right. We would need to do that. We would need to go for the electronic approval, which, yeah, I was going to say, it's probably not relevant, but I've done some testing. We are not expecting many errors or warnings to pop up, but just in case something new does pop up, because the tooling changes all the time, and some of these messages that we are getting in QA reports may be caused by tooling, we would need to go for some kind of electronic vote, I think. Heath, you have a comment?
I might have misunderstood, but from the call that we had on Wednesday, there seemed to be some. Now, I don't fully understand the process, but there may be. I don't know if Stephen can assist in this because you've said that it's been approved by patient care, but I think there's another approval that's required. And they were talking about that
There is.
relevant to dev days and stuff like that being put off. So it would be like 2 or 3 weeks before that second approval being required. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that may actually be further delays that are out of our control. And if is what's our fallback position? If in that case, like, is the 26th of June movable?
So
I know there's a magic date of 30th of June, but
yeah, we already pushed it back a week there with the publish on 8th of July, although it'd be earlier. 7th of July in order for Spark testing event at least. Um,
I, okay, so the
so
publishing's on
I
the
think that
8th.
would be discussed on the 26th of June.
Yeah, okay.
So our fallback plans, if we in that meeting don't actually have everything available, I think we need to be clear at that point. And we will have had another IPS call, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we will have had another IPS call with Rob, and I know Dushy's speaking to Rob. So I think we'll have a clearer picture. Yeah, if delays are coming, then it depends on how long they are as to whether or not we decide to publish an AUPSR2 as like a two, like, sorry, a one, a one as 100, and then we ourselves publish a technical errata when AUPS gets around to it. If it looks like it's going to be like a long-term delay, I think that's what we're going to have to do. And so it's just judging how far away their publication is.
But if it's only a week away, would we consider delaying again
Yes,
a week?
I'll, send an email off to government and say, whoops,
Yeah.
we're a week later, that's all right. They won't have a problem with that. Unless there are any, so we'll have to do a snapshot, I think, for the Spark testing event anyway, which is on the 8th of July. So there will be and this is from our perspective, like tools down. There's no more normative or really any other changes. We're just waiting on IPS to publish at that point. So something there will be available, and yeah, we'll need to give follow up on that with IPS in the call in a fortnight. But I don't foresee it being a big problem. From the IPS update, that's going to be 2.0.1 technical errata, as you described. There's no changes that impact the AU patient summary implementers, right? They're informative. There's an update to the extensions pack, but it's not like we're actually changing any of the profile rules or any of those things. You had a shoulder moment there, Heath. Are you worried? Is there something that we should be talking about? No, okay.
Didn't realize I was on video.
Okay. But yeah, so ideally everything lines up perfectly. If it's going to drag on too long, we'll just publish and then issue a technical errata to make sure we stay in line with the latest IPS. But from our perspective, for people who are implementing AUPS, there is no difference to you. Whatever you've implemented is fine. The only difference, as we talked about, was the extensions pack dependency. That's it. But it doesn't actually like put any more must supports. It doesn't change cardinality. It doesn't change terminology. It's same. And then we move on to R2. So we'll kind of talk about that, I think, on the 26th of June. I think that's going to be part of the agenda is, okay, so now we're done. What next? And I think we have to have a little bit of a chat around like what next and how do we approach that, including things like do how we did with AU Core where there were the community pitches in Canberra, which I really liked. So I think assuming 26th of June we get like the governance things out of the way, the rest of it might be the chat on how do we want to actually go forwards now that we've got this initial release. So that's my target for the 26th of June meeting. That's kind of, oh no, that's not everything I have to say. Spark testing event, maybe sneak peek at R2. No, let's talk about that on the 26th of June.
So you're asking people to start thinking about what they might want to do for R2 and bring it to that
Absolutely.
26th.
That would be great. Yeah, because we don't really have open JIRAs or anything like that. So well, also it's the approach. Do we want to take a break for a month of meetings? We've been meeting through this, we've delivered this. Do we actually want to take a little bit of a break? And then the first meeting coming back is actually like talking about what are our ideas for it. So I was more thinking the 26th of June could even be what do I want to say, a plan the planning meeting, but it can absolutely be people who are going, here's my burning thing that I realize we haven't had time to do. So I just want to kind of like start that conversation on the 26th of June so that then we can work out what we want to do going forwards.
I guess we can continue some of those conversations on the 8th as well at the testing event. So
Maybe.
burning implementation issues, I guess is what I was thinking. Like what's troubling people
But it's
in their
not like I mean, you
implementations.
might discover that, but it's not like a connectathon. There are no breakouts like
Mm,
it is.
no.
More testing event, which is why we don't invite clinicians because it's really quiet. It's everybody at their laptops, like just typing. So maybe that'll happen, but I also think it's a really limited audience for that one. So it's one of the things that should come into a factor, but I think it's these calls and maybe a face-to-face meeting where we want to make sure that we have the community opportunity to say what are the priorities like that where do we go now?
I mean, there's obviously other stakeholders, but the implementers are the ones that now need to implement it. So that's what I was alluding to. It's like, okay, whilst you're implementing, what are your burning points that makes it hard or you need further guidance on and stuff like that. So there might be some outcomes from that. And just even over the next few months.
So yeah, I think I've finished with the updates unless anyone has any questions around. I think this is a really short-term schedule, but I've sort of alluded to, I think, let's plan out the rest of it.
So thanks, Danielle. Any questions or comments from anybody else? Okay, can always circle back. Thank you again. So moving forward then. So we've already spoken about this, but the next call will be on the 26th of June, and this is what we currently have on the agenda. But I think this will probably change a little bit. I guess also Danielle, on the back of what you just discussed on the previous slide, it could also be an opportunity for us to introduce a bit of a discussion point on how we want to navigate the coming weeks or months, and what do we do as a community. So I'm sure there's going to be some good discussions at the next meeting, and I think that's kind of it for today's call. So we had a shorter than usual call. We still have 5 minutes to spare, but before I just kind of wrap us up, I think just putting out a call if anyone's got anything else they want to raise or anything like that, given that we still have a bit of time. Otherwise, as I said, we'll probably get some time back on our diaries.
I did skip a slide around US PCS, and it's somewhat related to, I guess, next steps and things like that. I don't know if we just want to close up, but
yeah, I'm happy to go back to it. So this is the one, right? The one that's on the screen.
yes, that's right.
Yep.
So
if you want
just
to,
go.
yep.
Okay, so it's somewhat related to what we were just talking about, but I felt this was interesting and relevant, the work that's been going on in the US around their patient care summary. And also, as a result of that, the FHIR clinical document implementation guide. So the US patient care summary is actually derived from this other implementation guide called FHIR clinical document, which kind of has its heritage back into CDA structures. So it was trying to take what the core of FHIR discusses as a FHIR document into something as a clinical document in the context of CDA, where it had these attributes of persistence and storage as a whole and the like. And as part of that, it had a whole heap of constraints that were very much based on some of the things that were done in America in particular on a further constraint of CDA called CCDA. I can't remember what the second C stands for, but doesn't matter. But the fact that they derive from this clinical document implementation guide made it challenging to align with IPS. I think in some of the assessment, we identified that it was incompatible. Now, that's contrary to what I've just talked about in the Connectathon. We were able to actually make things work in practice. But the FHIR clinical document has stronger requirements than the IPS. But then the document content uses entries that are using profiles from US core. Again, this makes it somewhat challenging to align with IPS. But those profiles are generally weaker, but can also be stronger in certain circumstances. One of the other things is that they've done is that they've actually limited the set of sections to only 6. Now, when I say limited, it's not limited as such. They've only defined 6 sections. Sorry, they've defined 7 sections. 6 of those are from the 16 in IPS. And then they've added an additional section called recent encounters. And that concept to me is actually quite interesting, and the rationale for including this additional section for recent encounters is to basically provide some information to those reading the IPS that these other encounters happened recently, and perhaps you want to be able to go and get more information from them, however you do that. So I thought that was a really interesting context or addition, and apparently that addition actually stemmed from the work that was actually done in Canada, which preempted IPS2 and this PCS and our work as well, where Canada actually have not actually implemented IPS directly either. It's IPS-like. So that was an interesting addition that they've made. And in addition, what they've also done is provided some recommendations of what content is included into a US VCS. And I've only just given some examples here, but you can see the kind of things or recommendations that they're making, where for the problems, they're talking about problems with a status of active recurrence, relapse, and remission. For medications, that has an intent of order or plan and a status of active. Immunizations is the last 24 months of immunizations and procedures. This is the fuzzy one. Major procedures or last 90 days. So it's interesting to see these sorts of things that they're trying to do to give their implementers some guidance around and I guess some consistency in the way that they implement things within the US realm. And finally, as a result of what I've talked about at the beginning there, because the USPCS is deriving from FHIR clinical document and not from the IPS profiles, and they got a lot of feedback around that and how restrictive or I guess the stronger requirements from that. So they've actually revisited the FHIR clinical document IG, and they're currently going through an update on that particular implementation guide. And I'm not sure if the review process or feedback process is closed by now, Danielle, but I know that we've provided some feedback on that.
Danielle had to drop. Oh,
okay.
I think the review periods and that they're going through the tickets and triaging the tickets at the moment. Yeah.
And I sat in on some of those reviews, and again, it was interesting to see that. But they're really trying to pull this IG back, still within those main principles, but to ensure that this new IG or this updated IG is going to be reusable for scenarios like IPS and other types of clinical documents without some of the burdens from the past of CDA. So as I said here on the slide, many of the elements and extensions have must support removed to allow the ability for systems to adopt this IG within their varying use cases. So again, I'm flipping this back to, I guess, what Danielle was talking about with next steps and R2 and stuff. So I guess these are some of the examples of sorts of things that we might want to start considering as part of an R2. I talked about rendering previously, some of the issues around that, but these might be some of the types of things that we might want to consider as additional localizations for an R2. But certainly with regard to those recommendations, they started changing those recommendations. There was some things around encounter in particular. I didn't provide this example, but for things like outpatient encounters were the last 6 months, and hospital encounters were last 12 months. And, the rules are quite specific, but then there was those that the conversations we have, it all depends, right? It's contextual, so how can you actually make those recommendations? So they're having the same conversations, certainly trying to do the right thing, but yeah, really quite challenging. So hopefully that will sort of give you some food for thought and for your thinking about what we might want to tackle in the next iteration of IPS or AUPS.
Thanks. Is there a URL you can share to the IG? Do you think people want to go and have a look at it?
Which
the
one? The
PCS,
PCS?
Yeah.
I can do both. Oops. So that's the PCS. Now this is actually being updated as well. That's gone through a ballot already. So this is obviously the CI build. So they're updating this. So it's a moving target. And also the clinical documents IG as well, if people are interested.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
There was a question in the chat from Stephen. Stephen, do you want to?
Yes, sorry.
Have a discussion, yeah.
It is I mean, I understand the reason for for including a section for recent encounters, but when you introduce that section, then it raises the questions of then what's the distinction between a patient summary and also the encounter record that we in Australia at least are talking about, right? And also in the US and also other parts of the world, there are always the generations of clinical documents like consult notes and progress notes, which are also under the umbrella of encounter record, if you may. So when you introduce a section like that into patient summary, then it sort of raises the question of the potential for blurring the boundaries and scope between the two categories, and also bringing confusion to whoever may use those records or documents, and then how to decide what to use. So I know that in the US, they haven't really talked about that because they don't have the concept of encounter record that we are working on for now. But that's a question that needs to be addressed. So your thoughts, Heath?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Stephen. I mean, and this is my personal opinion, but we don't have a definitive definition of what encounter record is yet. We're just in our discovery phase. So I guess until we narrow that down, it's a little bit hard to answer. But my personal opinion is that they are complementary. So it is a list of encounters in the patient's or the US PCS. And it's literally just that. It is a list of encounter resources. So for me, I kind of see it almost like an index. So to the encounter records. To get a patient summary, here are the encounters that have happened recently. And then, as I said before, how I want to drill into that particular encounter. I might have a reason for a referral or something in that encounter that pricks up my ears, or it's at a particular provider. So, I'm interested in that. I want to drill in further. And then based on perhaps the metadata that's in that encounter, that I can then go and actually get other information, whatever that other information might be, or how we get it. And it may not even be in an encounter record. It could be individual resources through a FHIR API, for example. So again, it's our usual mantra, it depends, but I think this is a really nice index to be able to even just know that the encounter occurred and that perhaps there's something I want to be able to go and get more information about, whatever that artifact might be, or however I actually do that exchange of information, including a phone call.
So it's one thing to use that as a label for indexing or as a piece of metadata to index the record and also for discovery support. But it's a different thing when you consider that the encounter record itself is a distinct clinical concept and entity per se. So when you look at encounter record, there are always information like, say, for example, what are the patient's chief complaints at this encounter? What are the reasons of the encounter, which may include sort of a set of clinical interventions that the patient may or may not be seeking. So from a clinical content perspective, they are distinct. And so therefore, I'm actually quite intrigued about the US approach. And I haven't raised this with Rob yet, but I think that's a question that I would want to raise with them and Gay Dolan as well. That the mere introduction of that section and the concept blurs the scope and boundaries of the two document types, which can cause downstream problems in terms of semantics and usage.
Yeah, as I said, it depends on the definition of what is an encounter record. So the section is just literally encounter resources, and if an encounter record is more than that, then so be it. There is a distinction. Anyway.
Yeah, I think we do need to explore this a lot more in our AU encounter record meetings, and we do have, from my recollection, at least at the Brisbane meeting, we do have at least some sort of definitions for encounter record, and I think against that definition, we need to examine it very carefully as to the potential for overlap when. And whether or not the concept of encounter sections should be introduced into the AUPS. So those are the key questions that we need to consider. With that, I'll shut up.
Well, good discussion. I think it will be interesting to see what happens as they kick off implementation of this work in the country. Are we expecting to see some pressure going up to IPS to potentially relax things a little bit so they can integrate a bit more neatly? Because it seems to be that it might be the direction we'll probably see them taking in the not so kind of long term, right?
What do you mean by relax, Ricardo?
If they've decided, so that I was just skimming through their specification, and there's definitely some words suggesting alignment to IPS, but as you pointed out, their specification doesn't derive from IPS, and it seems to be a bit more or a bit weaker than the IPS specification. But could this lead to them saying, look, if we really want to be part of this whole IPS movement, then now we're probably going to have to, I guess, relax the IPS specification a little bit to integrate us into the ecosystem and ensure that things kind of are a bit more compatible, which it seems to be what they're doing with the FHIR clinical document IG. Is that expected to happen in the IPS implementation guide, which will then have some impact downstream to us? I don't know. Are we going to see some lobbying from the US on that space or not?
Yeah, on that, Ricardo, I think my feel is that is the approach. They're going to push that clinical documents towards IPS, because there was that JIRA that was raised against our IG, asking us to consider the use of clinical documents, and that it's the wording of that was that it may eventually end up in IPS. So it's basically trying to get us to go in lockstep with them forward ahead of IPS. But I think that's going to be, they're going to push IPS to align to their approach, whether it gets there or not. But I think that's where they are pushing. And then I think our approach is that we would then follow the lead of IPS, where IPS goes. But obviously we need to understand where this is coming from. And I think that the clinical documents being so tightly coupled with CDA, is that something we really want in IPS? Because, I mean, that's the US approach, given they've got the CDA. Whether when we're greenfield on some of this, that we actually want to force us into a CDA model.
Yeah, because they seem to indicate that, that, as you said, that's the approach they follow to align with some of the decisions they had already made previously. And, the way I read it is, if they had gone down the path of IPS, the path we went down, they felt that they couldn't really implement it successfully and would be adopted successfully within the country, which tells me, they probably went down an easier route based on what they have. But what that will then trigger in terms of IPS in the future, I think it's to be monitored.
I think there's certainly that history that they've brought forward, I guess, into this USBCS is that CCDA, which again the clinical document IG seems to have its basis from that, and then also the fact that a lot of their vendors already implement US core, and that's mandated in government legislation, etc. And hence it was probably an easier channel for them just to say, just shove whatever you've got as your US core resource into this document, even though it's not necessarily as compliant with the equivalent IPS profile. So I now understand where you were going from, is will they weaken it? And to some extent that was kind of some of the stuff that we were feeding back to the IPS group around some of the profiling of things like codable concept and coding and the obligations that they were putting on some of those things that were not perhaps they were too strong. So yeah, it will be interesting. So as I said, there's two levels where at the moment the clinical document is stronger than IPS, but then there's the entries profiles that are weaker than IPS. So so I think it's all good. And they keep talking about the year of implementation, and I guess we're now kind of in that same place now as well. Like that's why I was sort of saying, like, it really comes back to getting feedback from implementers now. So we want to know about what's making it hard to implement or what works well, etc. So we're kind of now in AUPS year of implementation, so that we can get your feedback. But
okay. All right. So we might, if there's nothing else, we might actually just close the call, which I think we'll do. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending this call. Great discussions, and we'll see you all at the next one on the 26th. So thanks to everybody.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Thank you.
Thank you.